Today we'll be doing the Balance Council votes for the upcoming August Balance Council, and I think this time I'll clarify that for changes that are very obviously going to happen because a lot of people are already voting for them, I may not always put them on my list because they're obviously going to happen. Some things like this would be in the past council when I didn't vote for like Dryad Fledgling, for example, because literally everyone was going to vote to nerf it from 6 to 5. I didn't feel like I needed to put it on my Balance Council list because it was going to happen. I get a lot of comments all the time about people who don't understand this, so I think I'll just say it right there that if something is very obviously going to happen because a large portion of the community is already going to vote for it, which you can go look up what the Balance Councils are for the other regions if you want to, or the Global Balance Council, get people's ideas, you can see what people are already voting for, then I may not vote for it. So just get that out of the way, and hopefully no one comments it this time. So, start off with, let's do the power increases. This is, to be honest, my favorite category. And I think we'll start off with one I voted for before. We'll just grab our Carrick Frigate. I'll explain this one a little bit. Carrick Frigate's a 6th version card, so it should be really good. It doesn't see any play. The 6th version engines are generally very strong. At most, it gives you 2 points per turn by spawning a guy, where you have the crew effect. You can remove the crew. If it goes up to 6, be a little more consistent. It's not as strong as some of the other 6th version engines, stuff like Townsfolk, stuff like Message from the Sea if it's not answered, stuff like Flatter. It's not as strong. And the thing with this is it really would enable some other Northern Realms decks that need the tokens to be spawned. Things like Queen Meave, things like even like War Elephant really benefits from it. All the Northern Realms swarming type cards really benefit from this, so I would hope this would help make a new deck. So we're voting for it. The next one is going to be Procession of Penance. This one, it's just Firesworn in particular. We'll give a moment to Firesworn here. I was torn because Syndicate has, I believe, the highest or second highest win rate at the moment at the top of the ladder. And Syndicate is very strong. Firesworn is not very strong. So I was torn between either nerfing some other Syndicate cards, because I wasn't too sure on which ones to do, or just giving Firesworn a couple buffs, and I think, or a buff or two. And I think we'll go with the Firesworn this time. So I'm not super sure what I'd want to vote to nerf in Syndicate. And Syndicate's also like always had the highest win rate, or close to it, because just a really high skill ceiling faction with the coins, in my opinion at least. The last power buff here I want to do on El Slave Trader. Give monsters a bit of help. And this is for Frost. The reason I want to vote for this card is because you never, like, even if you're playing Tyrannalia and trying to fit in one of each Wild Hunt card, this still doesn't make the cut, which I think is not good. I think it should be playable in Wild Hunt. And I think giving this a power buff would help a lot, because at the moment you pick the opponent's card and you get 1 vitality, goes to 4. Being able to remove this with a 4 damage card just feels really bad. It doesn't actually, his ability is, you can play around the ability, so it's not like an immediate effect. The ability is strong, but you can play around it. You can either hit the Slave Trader, you can lock it, you can remove the Infused. There's a lot of ways to play around it, so I think this card's pretty fair. I just think that giving our power would help it out, maybe see it, let it see a bit more play. I like how we type in A and Mullane shows up here. One day, Mullane, one day. But if no one else is voting for it, we can't get that card buffed yet. So on to the, you know what, let's do the other buffs first. Let's do the provision buffs. So right off the bat, this one I voted for as well before, I think, Artis. So Artis, I believe the idea for Artis, this is my idea, by the way, and I think maybe what the Gwent developers intended, is for Artis to make his own deck, right? You can make an Artis deck based around the Cultist, based around damage your own guys with the Artis. So Self-Wound obviously damages his own guys, but you have a bunch of cards that don't see play in it. So like Veteran, Veteran, what is his name? Like this guy, he's not a great example here because of how the deploys would stack necessarily, but there are cards that when you damage themselves, get their Berserks off. Of course, we don't know how to spell Berserk, so that doesn't help. There we go. So there's a lot of Berserk cards that have abilities. Like, obviously the Fanatic comes to mind here. You never play this card unless you're playing Artis to play it off of it, because you just get 2 of it off of the Swallowblood Totem. Stuff like Drum Berserker is triggered off of the Artis. There's a lot of cards that you can take advantage of here. Playing Vildcoddle, for example, works really nicely. And I just think the self-damage, like Draco Turtle as well, even though it's not a similar card, I think Artis should be able to make his own deck. The problem with that is you'd have to Singrif's right Artis to play it more than once. And decks that are based around one card typically want to either have a way to play that card more than once, so things like Melusian you play more than once, or decks to make copies of them, or you want to have cards that do similar things that you can replace them with in different rounds. For example, Bounty, you play Caleb one round, it puts out a bunch of bounties. Witchfinder does basically the same idea, puts out a bunch of bounties. You have one for each of the long rounds you want to play. For the Artist self-wound decks, I really think he needs to be 10. First of all, even if he was 10, he's not good enough as 11 as it is. I've tried him out a fair bit. He needs the buff, and even that also helps potentially make a cultist deck with him. So I think he definitely warrants the buff there. And then the other one, we'll stick in Skelga for a second here. For another card that really I think needs the buff, that's Sarah's Fearless. She's just... Okay, so she comes out, she's 4 for 10, the same as Roach, just baseline. You have to do 9 self-damage, which is not a small amount. Hubert comes out when you do, like, 10 orders, and he's a 5 for, like, 8. So you're really looking at Sarah's Fearless, and Roach is a 4 for 10 as well. Sarah's Fearless really needs to use her order to get value, and I think either for that you want her to be bigger when she comes out, or she'd be cheaper so it's less expensive to tech into her in your deck. And I like the less expensive option for her. So I've always thought she should get a little buff. And I like this. I want to make her a little more viable. Because Self-Wound is a very strong deck. It's one of my favorite Skellige decks. But she just doesn't make the cut. And I would like if there be options for her. And to be fair, at 9 you could play her in Golden Necker. Although I'm not sure a Golden Necker Self-Wound would be that good. Because you don't have Small Blood. But you don't have Sigvald after his nerf. But it could be kind of fun to play with. So, I don't really think she'll make it to Golden Necker, but I just want her to be cheaper as like a tech option for self-wound decks. And the last one here, I hate voting for reversions, but I think this one has to be done. Water of Broccolon at 9 was not the problem with the Harmony buff last patch. It was the Dried Fledglings getting buffed, and making options for deck building in Harmony where you can do things like Golden Necker I think is really cool. Like, it gives you a lot of options. Right now, Harmony is very inflexible and not good. I'll be honest there. There's a reason we didn't make a Harmony video this patch after the changes. But I think this is fair to be at 9, and I didn't like that it got changed back. So I normally don't vote for reversions of stuff, but it's just canceling one out. I just think this would be a good one, and by itself would hopefully help out Harmony without needing to buff other cards all at once. So, on to the nerfs then. Let's do the power nerfs first. So, for these, you'll see a lot of overlap if you look at the other balance councils with some of the other lists, but I kind of agree. So I think Dwimveandra will stick on here. She's going to go on here for a second. So Dwimveandra is one that I just think has too much value most of the time. She usually plays for about 10. Just 10 for 5 usually, and usually on Resilience, because you can put her, usually you put her on like a location. Use her on something like Mushy Truffle, for example, reset that, get the Froths. I just think she's generally getting too much value for a 5 Frisian neutral card. Granted, it does take some setup. Granted, you do have to be playing those other locations, but almost all of the locations that you want to use her on will give you at least 6 value with this. So I think she's just playing for a little bit too much at the moment. And obviously, there's the cases where she plays for way more than that. We can just take a look here. In particular, the one I want to talk about is Care Troll Day. Obviously, you get more value off Care Troll Day than almost any of the other ones. Even stuff like Garrison, this hurts the most popular, well, not most popular, the really strong Northern Realms decks, the spam units. Like, well, it's really going to hurt. In particular, the Fultis Blue Stripes Commandos decks, which play this. Mushy Truffle also floats some. Like, she gets a lot of value on these resets, and I think just making her one less powered make it a little bit less tempo when you do those things. Because she also sets up the next round. If you want to use her that way, maybe she shouldn't play for as much tempo. But I don't have as strong a feeling for the nerfs as I do for the buffs most of the time. Speaking of these, the other one we want to do here is Operator. It's kind of the same thing. Operator just nowadays tends to play, I think, for a little bit too much. Making an extra copy of your key bronzes, usually something like a Flutter, Messenger from the Sea, those type of things in Renfree decks. Okay, everyone I'm pretty sure at this point knows my opinion about Renfree. We're not going to vote to nerf Renfree, but I think if we lower the tempo on something like Operator, it really gets abused by those decks by throwing their leaders early. That would help address some of that as well without directly nerfing the Renfree. And she's used for a lot of really, Operator is a key, right? I think. I don't actually know. I think so. But I think Operator's just abused a lot, and making him a little less tempo for when you set those abuses up, I think's fair. And the last card we want to put here is not really a nerf per se. It's the Demon Warship. So this guy here is the one when you play a pirate, damage self and random anybody want. No one plays this in Pirates, but I think this card's really cool because it's got the Death Wish when it brings back a highest power pirate. There's a lot of self-damage, kind of, that works with pirates, but not really. Like, you armor up the warship with the leader, and then what? The warship doesn't die, which I think is silly. But I think this card should be a little lower power, make it easier to kill. Honestly, I wouldn't mind if this thing went to, like, even less, where you could kill it in some kind of hybrid self-wound deck. Because making this easier to kill, allied, I think is the word we want here. For, this? No. I'm just damaging allied. I'm thinking of, like, Terror Crew Plunderer and such. Is that the wording? I guess maybe not. Like, stuff like Bear Witcher, stuff like Butcher. Things that do self-damage, but don't necessarily fit. Like, I'd like pirates to get a little help without just reverting all the nerfs to, like, Onslaught and all the things that got buffed, then nerfed again. So I think Demon Warship is a pretty nice card to maybe help out that deck. And lowering its power would make it easier to kill. So it's less tempo, but maybe you can kill it faster. I don't know if this one's controversial or not, but I think since it can't be made cheaper, like it's already 4 provisions, the only other options to buff this card are to make it easier to kill or to make it higher tempo when you play it, but that reduces its ability. So I really think the only way to help this card is to make it less power. So I think I would like to see that happen. And the last category are the provision nerfs. They're getting more expensive here. The first one right off the bat, I think I said this in the last one. Griffin Witcher Adept, 5 for 5. That's probably where it should be. That was the whole goal. Griffin Witcher Adept 5 for 5. And if this gets voted for, only one change can go through per card. So if this goes through, it can't then be reverted to 4 power as well. So I really think this is important to get this 5 for 5 where I think the card should be. And you can play the Griffin Witcher Adepts decks. Like right now the deck's pretty strong, but once this gets its provision nerf, it should be okay. I really think this should be 5 for 5, and that will be fine just how it is. The other one we're going to vote for here kind of doubles up with the Blue Stripes and Garrison and Dwimviandra is I think King Foltest. I got this idea by looking at some of the other Balance Council suggestions. I don't like the idea of just nerfing the Blue Stripes Commandos. I think King Foltest, though, for an 11 provision might do a little bit too much. So I think it's fair that he'll be 12. I think Lirio and Shinmiri voted for this one. That's where I got the idea from. I think this is a good idea. Maybe making the Blue Stripes Commandos a little bit weaker via the deck, not the Commandos themselves. Because I like the Commandos being good. I like the deck being viable. I think Foltest may be a little more expensive. Would be helpful there as well without hurting deck too much. Because that's the only deck he's used in. And I think he's so good in that deck. I think he's probably warrants being a little more expensive to put into it. I mean, you can play Blue Stripes Commandos, theoretically, with Reavers, but Reaver Scouts, but I haven't seen that yet, and it wasn't big enough to convince me. And the last change here is one I really struggled to pick. I was debating between either a nerf to Syndicate, well, mostly a nerf to Syndicate, because Syndicate's really good and not really getting addressed on these. So what I ended up coming up with was I decided I'd either have to nerf a Syndicate card, and to be honest, I didn't want to just revert Candle, which was the most obvious one that came to mind, because I like the Candle being a little cheaper, because it doesn't actually do that much. Like, 7 provisions, it just gives you a carryover fee. It's really good. It's really good in decks like Akarantia. I'm not sure about reverting it to 8. I don't know how I feel about that. I think it might be worthy, maybe. I'm not too sure. But I didn't really have any cards in mind I really wanted nerfed in Syndicate with provisions. So I just thought maybe the better way to do that is make some of the other Syndicate decks a little more competitive so you don't just see the same thing. So I think, as much as I don't think I ever put a leader on this before, let's just do, I'm thinking Congregation up a provision. I mind 0% if this doesn't go through. As really, this is just, I wasn't sure what to pick for this slot. So hopefully, the idea here is that hopefully this way, Syndicate, like look at the leaders. Hidden Cache, Pirates Cove, and Congregation are all 16s. I think Firesworn could warrant being one more, so you have more options. The thing with the Firesworns is you can either fit in expensive neutral cards, like, well, fairly expensive stuff like Oneiromancy, stuff like Seer Khan, stuff like Yennefer, that take advantage of your row filling type of stuff, Or maybe you could fit in more stuff in Devotion, because Devotion, well, you take up a lot of provisions with the upper range of this deck, usually. So I think maybe this is fine. I'd like to see Firestorm get a little better. It got some love, right? Firestorm's one of those decks where it's hard to say, right? Like, it got some help. What was the card they buffed? It was Lieutenant Von Hurst, right? He got a power. But I don't think it was enough. Like, Firestorm still just doesn't seem like it has it. So I think we'll vote for this one. I don't really know too much for this last slot. I was undecided. But anyway, guys, those are our Balance Council votes. Let us know what you think. And we will see you in the next one, where we should have a pretty fun deck coming out for you guys. That'll be it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. And you can check out some more videos over here. And thanks for watching.